Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lecture we'll continue our discussion on resampling. So in the previous lecture we have created a series object from a dateRange function. So let's use this dateRange function, dateSeries object. So if we call our dateSeries object that we created in the previous lecture, we have the first index May 5th 2016 at midnight, and we have our last index on May 7th 2016 at 6 o'clock, and we have hourly frequency. What we can do is, we mentioned last time that once we resample our data we can apply certain methods like mean, sum, count, and so on. That's what we'll do. For instance, let's take our dateSeries object, and then we can resample our data by simply calling the resample method. So we can call the resample method and then pass how we want to resample it, pass the frequency. Let's say we want to resample it by 3 hours or 180 minutes. So we can do that by simply passing 3 hours, and then once we resample our data set, we can call, let's say, the mean method to calculate the mean. So if I run this, we'll have, now you'll see that our data set is resampled with a frequency of 3 hours, right? If you look at the frequency here, it says 3 hours, and here we have the mean. So mean for the first one we have 0.608. If we compare this to our original dateSeries object, the first three values are what? 0.023, 0.77, and 1.03. So if you add up these three numbers and divide it by 3, it will give you 0.6. So that's the mean method on our resampled data. Another thing we can do is, let me copy this, paste it here, and now let's resample our data to show by 4 hours. Okay, and once we resample this, let's call the sum method, for instance. So now if we run this, we'll see that our data is initially resampled by 4 hours. The frequency is 4 hours. So we start with midnight and then 4 a.m. If we look at our original data series object, not data series, dateSeries. So if you take the first 4 rows, the value for the first 4 rows, you'll see here 2.79 plus 1 plus 0.77 plus 0.02 will give you this 4. So that's the sum. And then for the next 4 rows, which is starting from here up to here, and if you add up those 4 rows, the values for those 4 rows, you get 0.34. So that's the sum method. So that's another use of resampling. Once we resample our data based on a certain frequency, we can apply various aggregation methods like summation or count, mean, all of that. Another thing we can do is we can resample and calculate this methods only for few of our data by using slicing. For instance, let's resample our dateSeries object by 2 hours, and let's calculate the sum. And I want to do this, let's use some slicing, let's say 1 to 20. So I want to do this for only these indexes. So if I run this now, I only have indexes 1 up to 20, right? So this is index 1. Let me call my dateSeries object again. So we have our original date series, right? The first thing we did was what? Resampled it by 2 hours. So we have 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock. The reason why it starts from 2 o'clock is because we have applied index slicing. So index 1 to 20, right? Okay, let me show you. If I call resample here and then just simply pass 2 hours. If we simply pass that, you'll see that, okay, you'll see this warning, resample is now a deferred operation. Use mean instead of resample, okay. Let's add the mean method. So here you'll see that we are resampling it by 2 hours, right? So it starts from 0 and then 2, 4, 6 and goes all the way to the end. However, since we passed the slice index 1 to 20, so this is index 0 in our resample data, and then this is index 1, right? And then goes all the way to, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 20, but not including 20. That's why we have this slice starting from 2 to 14 o'clock. So starting from 2 to 14 o'clock. So once we resampled our data, we calculated the sum of this slice. So those are some of the methods that we can use on a resampled data. Another important application of resampling is when you are dealing with irregular data. So when you deal with irregular data, resampling becomes very resourceful, and we can see an example of that. So what I will do is I'll use the time series object, the date series object that we created, to create an irregular data, and I'll save it in a variable called irregular series. So don't worry about how I will be creating this irregular series. I just wanted to show you an example of irregular data. Okay, so we have our date series. Don't worry about this method, and we'll create a list by using NumPy's random choice method, and then we'll pass, for the choice we'll pass one value, and we'll pass it as a list containing a range of the length of my date series. Okay, length of my date series object, and for size, let's pass a size of 15 maybe, doesn't matter, and let's use one more attribute called replace, and we'll set it to false. So this method will create, let me go to a new line. This method will create an irregular series for that irregular data. That way we can use this resampling technique. Okay, now let me run it, and it says date series is not defined. This is series. Let's run it again. Name, okay, this is false. Let's run it again. Okay, now it looks good. If we call our irregular series object, now we have our irregular series. Starts on May 6, 2016 at 1 o'clock, and then you see there is no regularity in our data set. That's because of this choice method. So here we have May 6th, and then May 7th, and then May 5th, May 5th, 6th, 7th. So it's irregular. Our data is irregular. So when you are dealing with irregular data, in this case the order is not, our data is not ordered. So the first thing we need to do while dealing with irregular data is, let's order it in this case. So for that we'll call the sort index method, and this method will order the values for our series object. Let's do that next. So we have our irregular series object, and let's call the sort index method. And once we have that, we'll assign it to the same variable, irregular series. Now if we call our irregular series object, we'll see that the indexes are in order now, right? We start with May 5th, 2016, 1 o'clock, and then 5 o'clock, 13, 14, 20, and then May 6th. Now it's in order. Once we have our data set ordered, we can call the asFrequent method for resampling. Let's do that. So we have our irregular series, and let's call the asFrequent method, and we saw that we can pass frequency attribute for our asFrequent method. And let's save it in the same variable. Let's reassign the value to irregular series. Now if we call our irregular series object, we'll see that there will be some not a number or NaN values. So now we have NaN values, right? The next thing we can do is we can resample our irregular series object. So if we take our irregular series object, we can simply call the resample method and pass days for resampling. And once we resample our data, the next thing we can do is call various methods. For instance, we can call the min method. Okay, now we have a min. Another thing we can do is we can call the count method, that count. Oops, let me remove the quotation here. Count, run it again. So we have a count method, and we can call all other methods. Okay, so this is another application of resampling. The most important thing to remember is when you are dealing with irregular data, the first thing we need to do is reorder it. Reorder your data. In this case, we reordered it by its index. And then we did that by calling the sort index method. And once we have our data ordered, we can use the asFrequency method to resample it. And finally, you can call the resample method and apply various methods like min, count, variance, and so on. That's what I have for the lecture on resampling. So go through the examples and see the various usages of resampling. Thank you, everyone.